Rebecca Weathers.
Michael Campbell.
Brad?
Perfect. And I am David Williams, with Piper Sandler. A sort of quick intro about me, and then let's talk about what we're gonna cover, here for the next 4 hours. It could be, but it's not gonna be. Let Kristen know it's gonna be a minute.
Yeah.
You're working with Kristen Miles, which she is fantastic, super competent. She and I actually, our pandemic skill, people did like, sourdough baked bread, that kind of thing. We worked together at Portland Public in the past, and then I helped her get her job at OSBA, et cetera. Our pandemic skills, we both went and got our right at the same place during COVID together, so that was kind of a funny little word. So I don't know what you all did during COVID, but I got a doctorate.
Not that.
Not
that. I had a baby.
No, that trumps me, so for sure.
Sourdough.
Different kind
Well,
of-
where is it? All right, well, David Williams, a little bit about me and a little bit about Piper, and then let's talk a little bit about what we're gonna talk about tonight. So, myself, I am actually relatively new to the company, Piper Sandler. I've been with it for about 3 years now. But before that, I spent 20 years in education in Oregon. And if you recognize me at all from my commercials, no, I mean, I worked for the Oregon School Boards Association, quite a while ago. And then for Portland Public was chief of staff in the Beaverton School District and the Northwest Regional ESD. So very involved in education in Oregon over the years. And that work afforded me a knowledge base around education finances, property taxes, et cetera, which lends itself well to the work that Piper Sandler does. Now, what is Piper Sandler? Piper Sandler is the latest iteration of a company that has been working in Oregon for the past 40 years, originally called Seattle Northwest Securities, then Piper Jaffray, and now Piper Sandler. Technically headquartered in Minneapolis, but our Portland operation has been serving school districts in the state for all that time for first and foremost, their bond financing needs, so their capital financing needs, debt financing, et cetera. But in that work, a lot like my work in school districts, it gives us, the company, a unique expertise around things like property taxes and debt and the intersections of those things. So it gives us an opportunity to talk about a wide variety. So first, we're going to talk about something that is our bread and butter, if you will, and that is bond financing. You guys have been a longstanding client of ours, and we have always been excited to work with the district over the years, helping you with your capital needs. We serve almost every school district in the state with their financing needs. So we're going to talk about that first. Then the superintendent also asked me to talk a little bit about this other thing, PERS, and PERS bonding and PERS side accounts, which is a little bit of where our understanding around public finances and debt come into play. And we'll help sort of walk you through what that is and what to think about as we move forward in time on that. So that one's the add-on, but let's talk about bonds first. A bit of this work as we talk about bonds is a little bit of like property tax 101. So tell me, shut up, I got it, or definitely stop me with questions as we go. This isn't a wait until the end. Ask them as we go, and I'll make sure we address them as they're appropriate in the conversation. This might be the right direction. Perfect. Okay, so what are we talking about? General obligation bonds. Obviously, the school district has used general obligation bonding capacity in the past and will use it many times in the future. It is the primary tool that districts have for addressing significant capital construction needs, okay? So, of course, the state does not provide significant funding for capital construction, right? There is the awesome match. We'll talk about that a little bit, which is a really great opportunity to leverage some additions of dollars. But by and large, district capital needs are going to be addressed locally through capital bonding authority. And that authority is granted by the voters. So this is, you're going to go to the voters and ask them for the ability to borrow money. So let's break it down into a very simple fact there. You're asking voters to let you borrow money. The Constitution gives you this authority to ask the voters for that. And the voters will say, yes, we authorize you to borrow money. And then, of course, there's all kinds of strings and other requirements built into there. So let's talk about them a little bit. When we say bonds, of course, that's just fancy words for a loan. However, a bond is unlike a loan in one very key aspect. So you think about a home mortgage, right? You go borrow money to buy your house or borrow money to build a house, etc. You are going to get a rate from a bank, and it's gonna be, say, one loan over 20 years or 30 years or whatever your loan is gonna be at right now, high interest rates, about 7%. A bond, however, is going to function a little differently in that we're gonna take that mortgage and we're gonna slice it up into a whole bunch of little pieces. Primarily, every single year is a distinct piece of the loan. And every year we'll have a different interest rate associated. It's not variable. The rates don't change over time, but each year of the loan is a different rate for that year. So there's this thing, if you listen to any finance stuff, they call the yield curve. And generally in a normal yield curve, interest rates are low at the front end, the short end, and they're higher at the back end. So this curve aspect, right? The idea that if I'm gonna loan you money for 30 years, the stuff you're gonna pay back in year 30 is the riskiest of the loan, therefore it's gonna have the highest interest rate. The stuff you're gonna pay back in year 2, that's not very risky, I'm pretty sure you're gonna pay it back, so it's gonna have the lowest interest rate attached to it when you issue the debt, right? So think of it that way, okay? Debt service, just a couple of terms, like debt service is the amount you're gonna pay back in both interest and principal over time. GO bonds, this idea that the voters approve a bond is considered to be the highest credit quality that a public institution can issue in debt. There are ways that the district could incur debt that don't require voter approval. However, those don't come with certain other magical components to them. The biggest piece being the district could say borrow money against your general fund, but they can't levy a tax to pay it back. So a voter approved GO bond is high credit quality, one, because you've achieved this voter vote threshold. But in that, the voters have also authorized you essentially to levy, this is the like little bit in it, simply called a UTGO, unlimited tax general obligation. So a general obligation of the district for which you have authority to levy an unlimited tax on your voters. Now, why is that important, right? Very apropos to this community. It's important because when you go talk to your voters about a general obligation bond, you might be like, okay, it's gonna be, $1.50 per thousand of assessed value or $2 a thousand as a levy rate, right? But you can't necessarily guarantee that that's going to be the case because that is built in at the time you sell the debt based on what the assessed value in the community is, right? So you've got X assessed value, the tax is being levied across that entire assessed value base, right? However, should that assessed value either increase, in which case the levy rate would go down, or decrease, in which case the levy rate would go up in order to pay a fixed debt service. Obviously, you've experienced a time when your assessed value decreased significantly, right? Moment in time, fire, right? And so your ability then, from an investor perspective, the person who loaned you the money, the random investor in New York or whatever, they want to know you're going to pay it back no matter what. And the best way they know that is you have the ability to take that $1 per thousand levy rate and make it $2 per thousand on all remaining properties should that exist. That makes it so reliable from an investor perspective. They're going to give you the best opportunity. Okay. Okay. So how you do this, of course, you go to the voters. There are a couple of opportunities to go to the voters, both basically the May and November. You technically can go March and September, but those are non-elections and the double majority requirement applies in those. Therefore, you have to be 50% yes, and if you're 50% turnout, so not a great election. So you go in May and November. Everybody does. That's it. That's where we cycle in, simple majority required. Additionally, all school districts have a limit on the amount they can even ask their voters for. This is called your debt capacity limit. It is 7.95, so almost 8% of real market value in the community. Well, for Phoenix Town, that's over $400 million, right? That the levy rate on $400 million will be, it doesn't, you don't have to hire a consultant to know that's probably not going to pass because that'd be like a $10 a thousand levy rate. It's just not viable, right? But there is a generally a limit. Okay. You also have a ballot title when you're explaining this, and the ballot title will have 3 things in it. It will have a not to exceed debt amount. So I want to borrow $10 million. Do you, voters, will you authorize me to borrow $10 million? We'll also have a list of the ways you're gonna spend that money. Think of it like your contract with the voters. I wanna borrow the money, I'm gonna spend it on these things. You are limited to that. That list is a critical piece. And then lastly, your maximum duration of borrowing. I wanna borrow it for a 20-year period, indebtedness. Or 30-year, or 10-year, right? Whatever that borrowing limit indebtedness is. There's a key thing that's not in the list of 3 things that are required to get in the ballot title, and that's a levy rate. That's not a required. The voters don't authorize a levy rate, right? Because that levy rate floats every single year based on the assessed value based in the community. It is not a fixed item. Therefore, the voters don't authorize a levy rate. They authorize indebtedness. Now, every single school ballot title is going to have an estimated levy rate in it because the voters want to know that. And there was a point in time when the Secretary of State required it. They don't anymore, but it's become best practice, right? So everybody puts it in. We estimate this to be X levy rate, right? Okay, what can you use it for? Basically, anything with useful life of more than 1 year, right? The Constitution is both broad and narrow in this respect. You basically the only thing they say you cannot use it for is quote routine maintenance. Your definition of what routine is versus not is certainly up for debate. The way I describe it is sort of if you need to put a new motor, a new motor in your HVAC system, that new fan, that's going to be bondable. But if you need to put a new filter in, that's probably not bondable, right? Routine versus useful life of more than 1 year, kind of non-routine. So you think about it that way. The key in this, when we think about bonding, is that the one big component is you cannot out bond the life of the thing you're building or buying with the bond, right? So let's think about that. What does that mean? So you don't want to borrow money for longer than the useful life of an item itself, right? This is why you don't do 30-year debt on a car, right? You do 30-year debt on a home. So think of this in a school perspective. A lot of districts will build sort of technology into their bonds. Well, you wouldn't want to do a 30-year bond for Chromebooks, right? That's not going to work. But you might, as part of your bonding component, have Chromebooks in there because that is going to be sort of in theory paid back with the early indebtedness. But maybe you're also putting a roof on a building and that's going to give you 50 years of life. Okay, now you've got this average duration of the total set of projects. So if 80% of your bond project is really capital infrastructure, these items that have a 50-year or more useful life, and then 20% is technology that's got, say, a 5-year useful life, you're probably going to be balanced out because it's an averaging. And then the average life of your bonds is a funky math. It's not actually like if you borrow for 20 years, the average life is not 20 years of indebtedness. It's actually about 12 years is the average life of those bonds. Just it's funny math for bond math. That's what we talk about. Okay. Okay, so let's talk about what this all means for Phoenix, right? So we've got some scenarios in here. I'm not presuming anything about what y'all are doing. This is just based on some back and forth I had with Brent and Yasmin about what would be productive for you all to think about in relation to your current geo bonded debt, as well as sort of what's on the landscape, if you will, right? Okay, so a couple things we want to couch this in. First of all is interest rates. So one of the primary drivers of the cost of borrowing is the interest rate, the borrowing rate at the time. You can see this EKG chart here. We're not exactly 1990s historically high, but we are marginally high at the moment in interest rates. Paradoxically, or maybe not, if the economy kind of goes downward, which if you watch the stock market the last couple of days, maybe it is, interest rates will tend to fall as the economy goes down, right? So there's sort of a correlation there with that. So cost of borrowing will get lower. But cost of borrowing, there's 2 lines on here. There's the dark line and the light blue line. The blue line is tax exempt borrowing, which is what this would generally be. This is, the black line is the treasury rate, the taxable bonds. The tax exempt, and this is, I glossed over this, I don't even think I mentioned it. This is part of the beauty of municipal finance, school district bonds. The person buying your debt, the investor, think of this like stocks, right? They're buying stock in the district. The investor is, you're saying, I'm gonna pay you interest twice a year and a principal payment every year on that bond, right? For say a 10-year period. And the investor in exchange, gives you the money, but they don't have to pay state or federal income tax on that interest that you're paying them. That's kind of the beauty of this, particularly for people who might be sort of like, think high net worth retired individuals. They're looking for a reliable income source that doesn't have a taxable. This is what that looks like. This is tried and true municipal finances this way across the country. Oregon has the added benefit in this instance. We are the second highest income tax rate in the country. Therefore, it's sort of a higher benefit to an Oregon income tax payer to buy Oregon municipal debt, right? Because, well, you're one, not paying that federal income tax, which is anywhere from 24 to 37%, depending on your income level. And two, you're not paying the, marginal income tax rate of 9%, the Oregon highest rate. So you're getting this, 40 to 50% benefit, or 35 to 45% benefit from an income tax perspective. So you aren't, the investor is. But it's why these things get gobbled up pretty quickly. Whenever we go to sell them on the marketplace, we generally not ever have a problem, which is good. Okay, so interest. The other component is assessed value. So the tax you're going to levy to repay this debt service is levied across all taxable properties in the district. This is outside of compression, if you've heard that word, when we talked about operating levies and things like this. This is all outside of that. So it's going to be levied on all taxpayers in the jurisdiction. So we have to know what is the tax base that we get levied on. And we look at this and we can see where you're at. And the key one here is the middle column called total assessed value. So I won't go down a Measure 5 Oregon property tax rabbit hole. Just to know, real market value is interesting, which is why your debt capacity limit is almost immaterial, because that number is so much bigger. Your total assessed value is the number on which we would levy this tax. And you see that is almost $3 billion, right? Obviously, we can look at your history of growth. We can see the obvious notable 2.5% decline in property value in 2022 for obvious reasons, but immediate robust growth after that, right? So the Oregon Constitution says a piece of property in Oregon grows at 3% a year in assessed value, period, right? Doesn't matter if it sells, there's no reset at sale. For a variety of reasons, brand new property comes on at a suppressed rate that basically mimics this 3% per year. So anything above 3% is new value. And what's even more notable is, based on certain legislation, particularly passed around the wildfires, there was an opportunity for builders to basically replace their assessed value at the time. So a 7% growth shows even more excess beyond just simply rebuilding post wildfire, right? So that's a pretty healthy growth rate. 7%, 6.5%, 4.5%, almost 5%. Very healthy growth rate the last 4 years coming out of that. You all obviously have a better handle on what that means in your community and where it goes, although driving down here, there certainly are a lot of new buildings and facilities, as you see coming down the road. Okay, again, we talked about your real market value and your debt limit immaterial. Okay, the other thing we look at is what's your current debt, right? What are we building on top of when we think about this? In tiny print here, the pieces on the top, general obligation bonds. Any of those with the little hash mark at the very end, those of course you've already paid them off, but we just like to show our work and say, hey, this is cool. You've done these various series of bonds and refunding of those bonds. So anywhere where there's a refunding, so you did the 2001 bond, and then you have 05, 11, and 15, which were all refinancings of that 2001. You didn't get any money from those. A refinancing, that just tells me you saved the taxpayers money by reducing their future debt burden. So you're just lowering the interest they're going to pay overall. There's no benefit to the operations of the district from that. It just saves overall debt service payment on that. Okay. And then the 2018 A and B, two different series, but you can see what that is. And we can see, 35 and 19 million respectively, to remaining debt service on those two. So you have a fairly robust piece of debt service. We're still building on that. But you can see those carry all the way out to 2048 is the last maturity of that. And I have this in graphical form, so we'll look at that. Then the bottom line is your per site account, which we'll talk about later. It is not related to bonds, it's not levied on taxpayers at all. We just like to, again, show our work, we're showing you all of that, profile for the district.
Can you go back?
Yes.
How do we get to 114 on the total outstanding?
That's a great question, that's gotta be a typo.
Okay,
You do not have 100.
I had a mini heart attack.
Yeah, no, you do not have $114 million in
Okay.
outstanding debt. You
Okay.
have 49.6 million, 49.7, 59.7 million.
Yeah.
We did that times two
thinking.
on there. You're having a little panic attack.
No, we're-
got a pretty good financial management.
I did this evaluation, it was really strong.
But maybe you might need a, this was not a reflection, you didn't do it.
Yeah.
Probably a holdover in our table, but you do not have that.
Okay.
You got, from a GO perspective, you have the 55.
Yeah.
0.195,
Got it.
right? That's-
Yeah.
That's the important number.
I think it includes the interest for the GO bonds. It's very close to 114 million,
Oh.
that's why.
Oh, you may
That's
be
why,
right.
yes.
Sorry, yes, she gets the high scores on it.
100%.
Yes, I mean, so she's raising a very important, an important point, which we can, I don't know if we have the numbers later, but, you know, if you bought a house today and you did a 30-year mortgage at today's current interest rates, and you held that mortgage to maturity, in other words, you paid it all 30 years,
Yeah.
you're probably gonna pay double the price of a house, right? Because interest, right? The same dynamic applies here. Obviously, what we look for is opportunities to refinance that, as you did in the 5, 11, 15, to aggressively adjust that, just as a homeowner, just as I refinanced my home in 2020. Because
Yep.
if you had a mortgage in 2020, you probably did, because, you know, interest, I got like a 2.5%, right? So, you know, that idea that you're going to pay down that debt more aggressively, unlike a mortgage, you're probably not moving, you're not selling the house and moving. You are on some level carrying this debt and paying the full original maturity amount, right? You're not, there's no equity shuffle that can happen like with a home, right? You're going to pay the 55.195 million over time. It's a question of how much interest you're gonna pay on top of that, right? So, that's good catch, thank you. Okay. And notable, your 2018 bonds, your ballot title estimated a levy rate of $1.49. Okay, important note.
Yeah.
So this is that table just in graphical form. There are two series of bonds and we don't even get into why there are two series of bonds. It has to deal with the different type of bonds, deferred interest bonds and current interest bonds and the way they interact. But you can see that the two are built such that you have this little step in 2032, you have a little step down in 2032. What that tells me is when we sold your 2018 bonds, rates were probably better than when you started down that process, and we were able to restructure your debt at sale to build this little drop. And so if you did nothing, what that just means is you were able to save a decent amount of interest because you're putting less debt burden on the back end of this structure than you were on the front end, right? Okay, so you have, this is all that in current form. Now, notice that everything in color going forward is nice and smooth, right? But everything in the dark bars is kind of all over the place, right? Well, that's because the dark bars reflect the reality that took place, and the reality is every year your assessed value base changes. So that $1.49 that you're estimating is gonna be a little different. It's gonna be something that's a little higher, sometimes a little lower. It's gonna fluctuate. So while all those going forward look good and nice and level, I can guarantee you it won't actually realize that. It won't be that flat, particularly as that growth rate exceeds 3%. So this structure was built on assumption that your growth would be this nice linear 3%, because we like to be conservative, right? But as your growth comes in above 3%, your levy rate dips below. So remember, your ballot title said $1.49. I know this isn't always the scale, but this is not $1.49, right? There's a gap there. So your voters right now are paying less than $1.49 because property value has increased in the community. Therefore, the burden is spread more broadly across more property taxpayers or more value. Okay? Okay, so we ran a couple of scenarios, just to kind of show you what a perspective on. If you were like, I want to take advantage of that little step down, and I know I've got some work I want to do. And I know we've got some opportunities with the state to maybe get some additional dollars. Right? So we get three different scenarios here, awesome 1, awesome 2, and then a flat levy rate target. That should not be 72 million. That's a typo, boy, this is. The other one's not typo, that's not 72, but you'll see. That should say 13.5. Okay, so scenario one and scenario 2 both target the district borrowing 6.125. In bond land, they have to be in $5,000 increments, so $6.13 million in borrowing. What this does is allows you to apply for and receive the state matching grant, the awesome grant of also 6.13 was 6.125, which is your eligibility. That's what Freedom Assembly is eligible for. Okay, and the awesome 1 and awesome 2 here are two different methods by which you can achieve that. Okay. All three of these scenarios kind of assume this November 27, May 28 election cycle. From our bonding perspective, November to May is all in one calendar year or one fiscal year, and so that all operates the same. May to November is two different fiscal years, so it gets a little wonky. So for our perspective and our assumptions, let's just assume 27-28 election cycle, okay? So option 1 was targeted to getting the 6.13 in the shortest amount of time under that original projection of $1.49. Okay. Option 2 is getting that 6.13 million while keeping the levy rate as low as possible. Okay. And then option 3 is let's go back to that $1.49 and let's run the new debt out to be the same duration as our existing debt. And what is the sort of maximum borrowing? Okay, so you see those two, maximum borrowing under the last one is 13.5 million. So let's show you what that looks like in this. So the first one, awesome levy rate, awesome match with the levy rate target. So restore the $1.49 per thousand assessed value. And you can see this is a very short borrowing, right? So we're talking a 9-year borrowing at that $1.49 gets you through that. Now, we talked about interest rates, the 30-year borrowing, shorter borrowing. You can see the difference down here. 9-year borrowing, you're gonna pay 27% in total interest cost, right? Because we're doing it in a very short period of time. You're not carrying interest over a long period, okay? So that's option 1 at $1.49. Option 2 says, okay, instead, let's try to go with a no levy rate increase. We want it where it's at today and then just carry it out. Coincidentally, it runs coterminous to your existing debt. So we'll just fill in that whole step all the way across. The reason why there's nothing above, in order to do this structure, we use a thing called deferred interest bonds. And that is, you don't begin making interest payments on them. So remember I said, this assumes a November 27 or May 28 election. But you notice this first orange stub is in 2032. So you're not paying any interest until you get to that step. These are deferred interest bonds. They are more expensive, but it does allow you to just fill in that space without increase. It is today technically a penny increase. It goes to $1.34, whereas this bar today is $1.33. This will change as we move forward in time and assess value changes, but just know it's basically kind of in that ball of where that's at. Okay, and you'll remember that had, now we're talking 105% interest value, right, over time. So 20-year borrowing, that 100% deferred interest funds, $1.34 levy rate. Okay, then the last one just said, hey, let's borrow as much as we can at that $1.49 and end at the same time your existing debt ends in 2048. So you can see what this looks like. Obviously, you start year 1 with interest payments filling up to that $1.49 and stretching all the way across. And that is 13.5 million. Again, you would also then be eligible for the $6.125 million match from the state. That's your maximum match, is that 6.125. Right? And you see that is roughly because unlike the middle, the deferred only, we do begin interest payments on day one. So you get a little bit of a benefit there, so you can see if held to maturity, that's about 90% interest cost. A key assumption on this table that's worth noting is we have put 2% cushion on top of current interest rates. Remember I mentioned the current interest rates are kind of high, we put a 2% cushion on top of that. Now, if you sold this debt, there would be no cushion, nobody's getting that goes away. But again, this is I'd rather under promise and over deliver, so I wanna build that cushion. As you move forward in time and get closer to actually considering something, we will slowly lower that cushion in our successive estimates and scenarios to try to get closer to reality. The worst thing that could happen is we have no cushion on here and interest rates now go up and you're unable to borrow this or you're unable to fulfill that promise to the voters. So that's why we use that cushion in there when we're this far away from an election. Okay? Questions about those scenarios on here?
And just to clarify, each of those would be in addition to qualifying for awesome grant, so that'd be
Correct.
$12.5 million, $20 million.
That's correct, yes, yeah, that's your project fund at the end of the day, right, 12.5, or 20, that's correct, yeah. I mean, I think at the end of the day, you wanna let your project scope guide
Sure.
the work, but knowing where you feel the sort of community tolerance is it restoring the levy rate? Is it that short duration dynamic? Is it filling in that space? That personally, I could make a case for any one of these, right? The obvious case on this is, we don't think the voters wanna raise taxes at all, so we wanna fill this in, you know, and just be able to do $12 million worth of work. The obvious case on this one is, it's the most fiscally prudent, because I'm gonna start paying interest right away, I'm gonna pay the least amount of interest. And oh, by the way, this probably sets you up to be back on the ballot in 35, 36, which sounds like a really long ways away, but it's really not. Right, so it sets you up to be back on the ballot again at that point in time. At which time we've probably also done some refinancing work, but sets you up to that. I would note, we ran a number of other scenarios that look at some refinancing of your existing debt, which gets you a little bit of extra capacity and juice, so this is more thought exercise. As we go forward in time, if this becomes real, we wanna look at the interplay between those two, because there is an ability to save money when you reach the call date. So remember, these are 2018. Public debt generally has a 10-year call, so in 2028, at the same time, you might be prospectively on the ballot. We would also be refinancing some components of this to sort of get you additional capacity. So that might change the final numbers on this a little bit, but that's again, okay, case number 2 is this, like, both fiscally prudent and sets you to be back up for something bigger, you know, in 34, 35, 36. And then, of course, the last one is, hey, we've just got a lot more projects we need to do. We have 20 million to work, and we do think the voters would tolerate $1.49, and we wanna go back there. So there's a case to be made for any of these theoretical scenarios, as you think about them. Any questions?
How do we feel about the stability of the Austin grants?
It's a good question.
Great. That's a really good question.
That's a really good question.
So they are subject to local federal appropriation, not individual grants, but biennial grant amount, right? Unlike, say, community colleges, they're actually subject to an individual appropriation. So the Austin grants are biennially allocated. I say I feel good about them because, for a couple of reasons. This last year, all state agencies were asked to produce projected budget cut scenarios to present to the legislature. One of the things the Department of Ed put on their list was the local option equalization rate. Okay, so local option equalization rate is for districts that have a local option levy. Ashland is the only one in the area, right? Ashland doesn't get a local opportunity utilization levy because they have a fair amount of wealth in the community, but there are a number of districts that have a levy and they get a sort of true up based on property value, so it's sort of a little baby match. if you will. And the department had put that on the cut list, right? It's not a huge amount, but they did put it on the cut list, which kind of spooked a lot of people. I say that to note, nobody ever put the awesome money on the cut list for a pretty important reason. The awesome is paid for out of lottery bonds. It's not paid for out of the state general fund. Right now, it is bonding. The state does have to pay that money back over time, just like you pay this money back over time. But it's a different funding source, so it doesn't cut into operations from that perspective, from state operations. So it's sort of less on the chopping block. I think there's more push now than there was even when we started the program for maintaining and increasing the awesome rates. I mean, they did just increase them, right? Redid the formulas to change. You guys didn't really shift. You're in this kind of sweet spot of size and poverty that we usually at the 6 million. It didn't move you up or down, like some people. So, but for what it's worth, I don't see it going away.
Yeah, and I think in addition to that, the state's gonna get, they just did a whole statewide school district state of facilities. And they're gonna have real data that it does not look very good around the state. And so, and I think, if you, also look at the success who actually, this would be good data too, is when people have qualified for awesome bonds, that kicked over their bond success in getting some stuff. I mean, I'm thinking of Rogue River, that actually were able to pass their bond because they could show that they have a matching.
Oakland, school
Yeah,
district
yeah.
up the road. Same
So,
thing. Yeah.
I think there's some, it's a fair question. I don't think anything's safe, but I think that would be a tough one to go away, especially the way it's funded as well.
I mean, what I would say is, it's a great question. If you were considering, if our election assumption is close to correct, if you were considering November 27, May of 28, you will be post the legislative session at that point, so it will be appropriated at that point. I think next legislative session is going to be a significant challenge for the state budget, for education funding, et cetera. Overall, it's looking bad. There's a reason they didn't use the rainy day fund in the short session, because they're looking at next session being like, this is gonna be terrible. So we need to hang on to all the reserve money we can. So if you get through that session and the awesome is appropriated and it's available, you're in a biennium. It's very unlikely to be caught in the biennium at that point, right? Yeah. It's also possible that given increases in CPI, because the awesome grant is now has an inflationary factor, that you might be eligible for a little more, not a lot more, but a little more. Right? So, if you do like an awesome match approach, you want to just make sure you're maximizing that match for the dollar for dollar at the very least. Right? Yeah.
I feel like that data that you're talking about that they're gathering is gonna reveal to the state that they probably are gonna need to do some kind of state bonding. To be able to support the state of facilities.
It's possible. The number is going to be enormous.
Yeah.
And I think that is paradoxically a bigger challenge.
Yes.
Right? Like,
Right.
if the number was little, they could get their heads around it, but they're gonna get this facilities assessment data and it's gonna show in the billions of
Yes.
dollars
Yes.
of deferred work that
Yeah.
needs to happen, let alone
Yeah.
visioning work.
Yeah.
Right? We're not even talking,
No.
hey, I wanna build a CTE center that's new, or I wanna build a brand new high school or whatever, we're not even talking about that stuff.
Mhm.
We're talking about really deferred work,
Yeah. Mhm.
or as we used to call it, abandoned maintenance, not deferred maintenance.
Mhm.
That's gonna be big stuff. It's gonna be a big number.
Yeah.
It's gonna be a big number. Yeah, which makes it harder.
And just to clarify, this is based on the numbers that we know now, not any new developments, not any other stuff coming in the UGB or whatever.
That's right. So, it's a good question. So
3%.
we build
Yeah.
this out,
Yeah.
right, based on a 3% growth rate projected for out until 2048. So, the caveat, if development came in slower than 3%, your growth was lower than 3%, then that levy rate will slowly increase. If your growth is better than 3%, the levy rate will slowly decrease, right? That's what you've seen here, when we looked at those last 4 years of growth, right? Obviously, you can see what happened here. You had the fires, you have a decline of 2.5%, you have a jump, right? And then every year since then, you've had this decrease because of that growth in assessed value. That's, yeah.
So I also asked David to talk a little bit about just kind of pension bonds, and I know that's, you know, we're coming to the end, and so just not as in depth, but just 30,000 foot.
Yeah, thank you. Just the button up and you can take the PowerPoint down then. Oh, well, wait a minute. Couple things left on this. Oh, we just like to show all of your neighbors. You guys are obviously higher on the list, but there's always Ashland. So, you know, and they're not even close. They're $2. They're almost $2 higher than you in total levy. Obviously, there's a whole bunch you clustered in that 550 there in total rate. And this is no secret. There's a whole bunch of districts in Southern Oregon that don't have geo debt. Yeah. What's that?
We're higher than Medford. I was finding.
Yeah, cause Medford, when they issued their bonds previously, they built the debt structure. They were not our client at the time. They built their debt structure as what's called a fixed debt service, not a level levy. So the debt service, like your home mortgage, is the identical dollar amount every year of the life of the bonds. So flip that and put that on a growing tax base, and it's gonna look like this. It's gonna be a very steadily declining levy rate, right? So they were at one time, I believe their bond rate was $2.
Yeah.
Right? In the next 2 years, that'll be under $1. Because they have this rapidly declining levy rate because the debt service is flat, right? The dollar amount. So that's why they drop below there. Yeah.
Delta went out for bond, and that bond's 10 years older than ours, I think.
Yeah. They are indeed. Roseburg's gonna be back on the ballot. We'll see if they have any success. Just gonna get a little bit. And I know Sutherland's been talking about it. It was fake. And they get their heads around it. Clinton County needs to. What's that? You're still.
But where's Pinehurst at? They have them.
Oh, they're in the middle there.
Pinehurst, no, they've got no bond.
Yeah.
No existing geo debt, just their permanent rate.
Yeah, exactly. It's more than that.
This is David's little diatribe, of course, is this number here, the permanent rate. That's fixed in time. You can't change the permanent rate. That was pegged in 1997, right? Okay, unchangeable. We have an equalized funding system in the state, but we don't have an equalized revenue collection system. Because you have Three Rivers paying at $33.72. You've got Klamath Falls City paying $3.11, whereas Klamath Falls County is paying $4.05, right? Like, but they're right next to each other.
Well,
In fact, they're like really
also-
intertwined.
Klamath goes all the way up to Bend,
Oh, yeah.
so, yeah.
Yeah, but they're all right around Klamath Falls. I mean, that's a funky district, those two districts, but they don't have the same levy. So your taxpayer's not paying the same rate. And you can see some of them are close in that 450 range, and that is generally gonna be about the average. But there are quite a few districts, smaller mostly in the threes. My favorite is Riverdale School District, which is in southwest Portland. This is Dunthorpe, right? And they have like a $3.10 levy rate. Why are we not collecting more revenue from Dunthorpe? Nothing against Dunthorpe, if you.
Probably some savvy legislator was from there back in the.
What it is a reflection of what happened literally when Measure 47 and 50 were passed, right? So you might have these districts where your levy, the millage system at the time changed year over year. As you went back to the voters, you would regularly go to the voters and ask for a mill rate, an operating levy. And that would fluctuate over time. So it's literally, what was it when Measure 47 passed and it just got locked in?
Got it.
Way more dramatic on the local government side. This is why, like Josephine County, they had a sheriff's levy that expired that year. and therefore it was zero. So they had none, right? This is why you have places with like a 12-cent levy rate or things like that. This is why there's some funkiness abound, let alone natural conservative behavior towards taxes. Right. Okay. You made some disclosures, knock yourself out. Okay, so the next thing we want to talk about is PERS. And I am gonna just sort of try to give just the 30,000 foot. Kristen Miles did text me. She's really upset that I'm the reason that she's getting bumped. Is that all right? I
I'm keeping her updated.
told her to
Well,
have.
she can join.
Told her to have a whiskey and told her that she'll be fine. You have a couple of things in your packet, and I'm not gonna go through them page by page. One is more generic, this very colorful one with a hat, which is sort of our stock presentation on the question of should you or shouldn't you consider a pension obligation bond, a new pension obligation bond. And I'll give you a little bit of hit on that as I talk mostly about this other document, which has your name on it. This is an analysis of your existing site account, right? So Phoenix Town School District joined in a pool in 2004 to borrow money to deposit and help pay for your pension costs, your PERS costs. So what does that mean? Let's boil this into a nutshell a little bit. Okay, so every 2 years, the PERS system, they contract with this company, Milliman, and Milliman basically evaluates the entire system, and they project how much it will take to pay out benefits for all active and retired members in the system, including somebody who's literally just hired today. They have assumptions about how long people are gonna work in the system, how long they're gonna live, all of these kinds of things. And they determine how much it's gonna cost to pay for all of these employees over the life of the system, okay? And that is the liability of the system. And then they break that down. They say, okay, so PERS has a gigantic investment fund, right? The PERF, the Public Employee Retirement Fund, and that's invested and it has an amount. And then there's whatever's left that's unpaid, and that's what's called the unfunded liability. I'm gonna be kind of short-handing a lot of it, but it gets the point, right? So essentially, every employer, Phoenix Town School District, you are assigned a portion of that unfunded liability. So it's we don't have money on hand to pay out that benefit. Therefore, we need to charge you every month on your payroll to help receive those funds in order to pay for that. You have base rate, you have an amount you're paying anyway, because you just have members in the system today that you're paying a benefit. Think like 401k employer match. They're paying 6%, you're paying 6%, good. But now we have an assumption about how much the PERS fund will earn over time and how much is in there now and all these kinds of things. We say, okay, you still have this extra, let's call it $1 million of a liability that is not covered anywhere else. And so we're gonna charge you a little, we're not gonna charge you $1 million all at once, we're gonna charge you a little bit every month. And we're gonna project that out over, say, a 30-year span. We're just gonna charge you a little bit every month and get that money back so the PERS system has these funds, okay? The employer rate, all right? Well, what you can do is that $1 million, you could say instead, how about PERS, I give you $1 million, right? That unfunded liability amount. And you put that money in the PERS investment fund and you have invested alongside all your regular investments. And you create a little side account for me, your little bank account. And then you credit me back out of that. You say, that $1 million is gonna last for 20 years. And so every 2 years, we're gonna reevaluate how much is left in it. And we're just gonna carve out a little bit. Instead of charging you it, I'm gonna charge it to that fund. And we're gonna pull it out every month and cover that. And you have your rate credit. That's what that's called, right? Well, how do you have money to give them? You're not sitting on a bunch of money. You certainly aren't generally wanting to give, say, a reserve fund you might have. You can, but generally people are like, no, we need that for unforeseen instances in the district. Maybe a boiler blows up or a roof collapses or whatever. Like, I need those funds on hand. Well, you can borrow money and then give that borrowed money to PERS and have them invested. Well, when you borrow money, just as we've been going through, you now have debt service you've got to pay on that, right? So you say, I'm gonna borrow, I'm gonna create a pension bond, so like this capital bond, but solely for that debt. I'm gonna borrow to pay off that debt, give it all to PERS. And then I'm gonna have debt service on that debt. This is a bet you're going to make. In the world of investing, it's called arbitrage, right? You're looking to say, PERS is going to make more in investment earnings than I'm going to pay out in debt service, in interest cost, right? That's the bet you're gonna make when you do that. And hopefully that works out. And I know, we've done the math, it worked out wildly for your 2004 bonds, right? It has not worked out for everybody, and I'll talk about that, but it worked out for you 2004. So in this packet particularly, let's go bottom line in it. If you look at let's go to almost the very last page, or definitely the very last page. You see a table that's got several different colors on it. It's called amortization of 2027 terminating side accounts and pension bond savings summary. And it's page 11 if you can read the little page numbers on there. We've run a couple of scenarios because obviously your side account will terminate in 2027, not obviously. Your side account will terminate in 2027, it will go to zero. It is designed to do that, okay? So we've got experience from 2004 to today. We know what you have actually earned in investment earnings and what you paid out in debt service. And we can make some assumptions going forward. And we see that you have earned about $6.5 million on a bond of $14.8 million. Okay, so you won this bet in a significant way. And in fact, if you go, I probably could have done this more legally, but that's right. Do I have it? Yes. If you go to one, it's called page 3. It's on the page that has this little flow chart at the bottom. Or if you're, are you seeing? Oh, you're not, right?
Yeah, so
But you see, so page 3, so the one right before that flow chart one. That shows you the historical performance of your side account. So you borrowed $14.8 million. You can see you deposited that on day one. Obviously, there were costs of issuance that came out on the top. And then you can see the column immediately to the left of that deposit, reported rate credit. You can see the rate credit you have received. So that's a good, when it's in a negative number, that's a benefit to you. You've received that rate credit throughout the life of that bond. And I would call your attention to 2008, where your earnings, so the column to the right of that deposit, you can see the earnings reported your side account. Notice in 2008, you lost $4.5 million in your side account because 2008 was a housing crisis, right? It was terrible. PERS, you lost 27% that year. But even with that loss, you not in no year did you report you didn't have a cost of rate credit. And you only had a couple of, if you go to the very last column, which we're looking at sort of like your net, right? So we're netting out of your debt service. You only had a couple years there in the middle where you actually had a slight negative value, right? You kind of lost a little bit of money those 3 years, tiny, there's a nominal amount. And then immediately back, and you can see even in 2024, 1.1 million in savings, right? So very significant savings over the life of that. Now, as the warning, so there were pension bonds done in 03, 04, 05, and 07. Guess what happened to the people who borrowed in 2007? They lost 27%, but they didn't have prior earnings of 13, 15, and 10. And when you take that math number and you start with a negative, they never grow out. Those people who put in, there's like 7 of them that borrowed in 07, they will not make up the bet. But Medford was one. They borrowed in 07, and they'll be really excited when their side account goes away because it's not net anything. It's a net negative, right? You guys, when this goes away in 27, you're going to realize an increase in your PERS rate. Your monthly employer rate that's being charged is going to go up because that side account rate credit is going away. There's a slight mismatch. Your debt service payments actually go to June of 28, whereas your rate credit ends theoretically in December of 27. And based on some analysis we've done, you'll probably run out of your rate credit a little bit earlier. The last bit I'll show you on here is really depending on your payroll growth. Let's go to worst case scenario. So if you go to page 9, you can see the graph up here with the little purple bars embedded in it. So in an ideal world, you would have had these green bars, the shadow bars, that's your rate credit. They would have lasted through December of 27. So halfway through that next tranche in there. These are calendar years or fiscal years, excuse me, listed on there. So halfway through that next fiscal year, you would have had those green bars, the big shadow green bars, not the little ones on top, right? Okay, but because your payroll growth has exceeded PERS projections, you have overdrawn your side account. This is not a negative, the money isn't going anywhere else. You got the benefit, you just got it earlier. And it means, ignore the fact that they're purple, assume those were all green. It just means you're probably going to run out of rate credit in July of 27. Right, so you will have all the rest of fiscal 28 with a debt service payment, which by the way is 50% of all the debt service payments you've had up until now. It's designed that way, but you'll have that mismatch, and you can see that on the next chart on page 10, which is the debt service amounts that build on top of that, and then it goes away entirely. So the way to visualize this is really you go back to, if you're looking at the one with the orange bars now, you go back to June of 25, and you can see the purple bar all the way down at that low point. That was sort of the best you were getting in your rate credit. And then things start to jump up. PERS does evaluation every 2 years, so there's always going to be a change. You have this jump up as we get closer to the terminal phase of your side account. And then the last jump there in July of 27 to finish it out and go to 0. Okay, so great. There is some wonkiness, and your staff is doing a great job of figuring out how to navigate the sort of end of life of that side account. You have netted a much bigger benefit than, let's say, it was all a wash, the PERS earnings and your debt service were identical. You netted a far greater benefit. The bet worked out, right? But it means the jump probably feels bigger. The jump in expense is going to feel bigger than had you not netted it, right? So now you're going to jump up. Even if you ignore that debt service overlap in the last year, you know, if you go to July 28 there, you see that blue bar is a whole lot higher than the blue bar in June of 24 or June of 25, right? And that's solely because of that rate credit dynamic, the side account value and the disappearance of that value. Not a mismanagement of funds, not anything you really can do or should do. That's just a function of the way that is working. So we get the obvious question, should we do another side account? The answer is maybe. So the answer is don't do another side account just because you have a side account expiring. Okay, remember I talked about this is really an arbitrage bet. So you should only do them individually if it's going to, if you believe the bet will win, right? So it has to be evaluated in its own right on its own. And that's done a couple of ways. And I will say we have started the process of considering it because we want to be able, because of that pressure, we want to be able to take advantage of market conditions should they present themselves. I say should they present themselves because they're not there today. There are a couple things that protect you in this process. The biggest being that in order to do a pension bond and a pension side account, you have to get an independent analysis that will determine the probability of saving funds from a pension bond. So they actually do this thing called a Monte Carlo simulation. They run like 100 of them, and then they tell you the likelihood you'll save at several given interest rate targets, right? That is done generally as a pool. So you would probably not do this alone. You'll be in part of a big pool if this happens. And in fact, the idea of doing this analysis is already generated, and the Oregon School Business Officials Association is going to spearhead it because it is an independent analysis. They are in conversation with Echo Northwest, as we understand it. They've always done the past. And I know that your staff has indicated an interest in participating in that study. And that's a nominal fee, let's call it, say, $5,000 to get that, to be a part of that. The analysis is more than $5,000, but collectively all the districts pay about $5,000 cost. And the idea would be then that would give you the break point that you will individually as a district can decide whether or not to participate in a pool at a given interest rate or not. If we were doing it today, well, Piper's not even pushing it, right? We need interest rates, which are right now, it's a different rate we look at, it's the treasury taxable rate, and it's the commensurate one to the comparative one today is like at a 4.20, 4.20%. We need that to be like 3.75 before it makes sense, which is interesting because call your attention to the 2004 bond you did. And if you look at that chart on page 3, the table on page 3, at the very top, you see your TIC, your true interest cost was 5.4%, almost 5.5%. But I said I need like a 3.75, right? It is because the assumed rate of PERS earnings at the time was 8%. The assumed rate of earnings in PERS right now is 6.9%. So if PERS is already assuming they're gonna earn less money, then you need to have a lower cost of borrowing to get in on that action, right? Okay, so that's how that all plays out. So there will be many steps in this process. With the study work is happening, and just because the study happens doesn't mean anybody has to participate in a bond. I would say at best case scenario, rates go down, but best case scenario timeline is this is happening in like November, December, January, February. Like that would be sort of the earliest potential opportunity for another of this next winter, for another pension bond to come about. As a side note, we've learned several things about these bonds, particularly the ones expiring in 27. That's the first side account expirations we've ever had, right? So the way PERS is implementing them is funky, but that will also help us design future bonds. Particularly, the idea would be, let's not have the debt service extend that 6 months beyond, let's have it end quarter. As PERS operates on a calendar year, you'll operate a fiscal, and the bond market operates on a fiscal year. So let's do it earlier and longer. There are a couple of little tweaks there, but by and large, we need interest rates to be down. Should that proceed, you will have a much deeper presentation from us about this in the future. It would absolutely be a board decision, obviously staff recommendation one way or the other at that time, whether or not participate. And it would likely be a large pool, if it does exist, with a whole bunch of other school districts participating. And the once bit, twice shy, we are always mindful of what happened in 2007, or rather what happened in 2008. And want to make sure we're sort of reading the tea leaves appropriately, that we're not ahead of some bubble like that. Because sequencing of earnings matter. You all lost the same thing in 2008 as they did, who issued in 2007, but you had sequence of earnings originally. So you build up, now you're above your break point, even though you dropped down, you didn't drop below your break point, and then you build back up. Whereas you start here and drop down, now your base is so much lower to build back up, you kind of by definition never catch up. So that's kind of the 30,000 foot on that. I hope that helped. And happy to answer any questions if you have them, and certainly any follow-ups down the road if they come up. Hopefully give you a little sense of, particularly if you dive into that presentation, looking at the cash flow dynamic of the expiration of the side accounts, give you a little perspective on what your team's going to be dealing with as they build out the budgets, particularly the fiscal 28 budget, right, on what that looks like. So.
Super duper helpful. Probably the most thorough in my 11 years as a board member I've had. I feel like there's always more to learn. I feel like I've learned more tonight about bonds and about PERS debt. One of the questions I think that we haven't asked yet that we should is, let's say we decide, November 27 or May of 28, we do want to go out for something.
Yeah.
When do we need to start engaging you?
You're already engaging.
Right.
You're already ahead of the curve.
In earnest, though.
I mean, your team will engage me often in this process. So there are probably other more sort of important pieces involved. If you're like, let's say November 27, okay? Well, actually, I know May date's better, so let's say May 28. Let's say you're gonna go with May of 28, because November 27 is funky. This is not an election, and I wouldn't necessarily
And
recommend.
you don't wanna go in November usually. 'Cause
Tax
the
bill
tax
come
bill
out
come out, yeah.
and the odd year of November, you're the only thing on the ballot, there's nothing else.
Yeah.
So let's go with May. Let's say you're saying May of 28, okay? So let's back that timeline. You gotta file a ballot title. about March 1st. Okay, so May is the election. Now, March 1st, you gotta file a ballot title, which means you as a board have to adopt a resolution authorizing the election, let's say early February, right? Think about these timelines, okay? Now, you're gonna sort of figure out your final package probably in January-ish. But let's get into December. So December 1st and 15th, you have to file your awesome application. So December 1st, your long-range facilities plan and your facilities assessment, which they have. And then December 15th, your actual awesome application, which is a pretty limited thing. This is not a big lift. And then you are awarded or not, and we can get well into that later, gaming that system, but awarded or not, the awesome grant to be listed in your ballot title, which would be the goal, particularly on a smaller one. So you want to put that in your ballot title. So January is ballot title drafting, and you will work with us, but notably you will work with bond counsel on that. Bond counsel and bond underwriting, we operate very similarly, and that is we get paid out of the sale of the bonds. So we'll do all kinds of work up front, and there's no retention fee, there's no bill by the hour. So I say bond counsel is the best kind of lawyer. You can call them all the time. You're not running up any kind of bill. They like us, they're just gonna take a percentage of the bond at the end. Small, right, pennies. Okay, so you're gonna engage with them in that work. That's gonna be ballot title drafting. So December, you gotta submit that application. So really you think about from like your earnest conversations internal about final package, levy rates, all that kind of stuff is really fall of 27 is when you're really gonna be doing a lot of that work. Now, depending on the scale and the size of your actual facility request, you may want a longer community on-ramp, right? So you may be starting in January of 27 with a lot of community engagement work to really put together what is the package you want to do, and that's gonna vary based on size. If it's the 6 million or the 12, the 6 plus 6, so the 12 million, that's obviously much more limited in scope. It's not gonna be a big new flashy building particularly, but still community engagement work is valuable in that process and that build up. But that's worth considering is what that is. Obviously, summer is generally dead from a district perspective, so not a lot of work happens there, but I would say you're not having in this room and with your leadership team, earnest conversations around what the package looks like in early fall of 27, you're gonna be hard pressed to be ready for a May election, May of 28. Right?
And then, then the community engagement piece is important, like.
That's right.
I think we did 8 months
Yeah.
with community engagement, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, I mean, you think about it.
Project, that was a big scale.
Yeah, I mean, and you think about a May, like community engagement over the summer is always really hard, right? Not just the district people, but the community is summering, right? And so often for a May election, people view that like, okay, school's back September 1-ish, right? That's when we're gonna kick off our campaign, if you will, our community campaign. We've done some facilities assessment work, our long range plan, maybe we had a facilities committee that met in the spring and summer, and now we're gonna do community work in the fall to build up to what's the final thing I wanna put on the ballot and have a little bit of community design. This is the like giving the parameters with which to work in that gives ownership for community members who are involved when you bring a final ballot title to you all in January. Right.
And that's exactly what we did last time. We hit the ground, beginning of September with community work.
Thinking of like pictures of the roof at Orchard Hill in the drop-off line, like little mini billboards.
Well, we went to every open house that we
Yeah.
could and every event that we could. Choir's playing, we're gonna be there, It was a lot, but.
Yeah.
We went to every single.
Paid off.
Yeah, a lot of people they don't wanna lose the opportunity to open houses, so the fall back to school.
Yeah.
Things like that. So if you're ready for it, that's just a built-in good opportunity.
Yeah.
There's obviously restrictions on campaigning and stuff that can happen, but that doesn't trigger until after you've approved the ballot title. So the fall is really valuable time for the district to be able to tell its story without being handcuffed.
Yeah.
And getting information and getting ready and getting like stuff that you might be pushed back to, it kind of helped us decide how much to go out for. And what was gonna be,
So.
yeah. what the community was gonna be able to support.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah,
Thank
my,
you
my
so much.
pleasure, for sure. I always enjoy the opportunity to get out on stage, I really do. I do, come down here, probably twice a year-ish, sometimes it's more quarterly, so, if ever there's an opportunity and you want to engage more, I'm happy to swing by. The piece when you think about bond development, the one that I have found can be helpful is if you do put together some sort of community group, like a facilities team or community design, is doing a deeper sort of bonds 101 for them, like I did for you tonight, where it's more structured, so people understand what we're talking about bonds and property taxes and things like that, right?
Great,
Helpful level setting.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Why don't we do a 5-minute break, come back, so.
Sorry, Kristen.
And you?
Okay, you ready for me to go, or do you need to open?
Kristen,
You
Sorry.
should Probably announce.
can you hear us?
I can hear you.
Okay, great. Sorry you drew the short straw and had to follow David.
I always follow David.
Not follow, but wait for.
Same thing.
He's lucky he didn't have to follow you. All right.
Okay, well, thanks all for letting me be here and for taking the self-assessment. It's a really good practice. I like that you've done it multiple years in a row, and trust that you've all looked at the very long report. Tonight, what we're going to do is sort of take a bigger look at this. I will go through some individual things, but we're going to take a more holistic look and then hopefully get you to consensus on what you want to do with it, because taking it is one thing, but it doesn't mean anything if you don't do something with it. So we'll talk about some board professional development goals. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay, I think you see the right thing. I did ask you to think about some questions in advance. We'll go over those if you had an opportunity to do that. So the first things that I asked you to think about, and if you came with some thoughts on this, that'd be great. Even if not, we can think about this in real time. But I like to ask first, what did you observe about the data? And we're not making meaning yet. We're not looking for interpretations yet, just an observation. Did you observe anything about what you were looking at?
There's 8 votes, but we have 7 members.
Yep. I don't know what happened there. And since I can't see who took it, I don't know if somebody took it twice. Like I could usually, like in another way, in another format, there are other ways in which I can go in and delete somebody's something, but I couldn't in this way. So, so you had a guest.
I thought maybe Brett evaluated us.
Yeah.
Any other observations?
The green went up and the red went down.
Yeah, that's what I saw.
The green and blue, I guess.
Yep. Yep. Which is the goal, right? Anything else you want to mention as an observation at this point? And if not, what I'll ask next is, what meaning did you make of everything overall? So I think Dawn just started to say, I mean, in that observation, there's an inherent meaning there. So just wondering, as a board, as individuals, what when you were looking at this, what did you think that all meant? What did you walk away with going, oh, that's something that we saw?
Well, I didn't know what it meant, to tell you the truth, because it either meant, yes, we're improving, or people understand now what that means.
Yeah.
So that was my question. Does it mean that we're actually improving? Well, either way is good, right? Understanding is a good thing if everyone's understanding it. So did we understand everything better and like learn about the thing, or are we actually improving, or is it a little bit of both? I guess that was my question.
So let's ask that, because I'll go back to this. The fourth question is, what questions do you have after looking at the data? And that might be a question, so my question to you all would be, and of course, you may not remember what you filled out last year, but what sense do you all have about, did you just feel like you understood the instrument a little better this year, which of course is a good thing, or did you feel like, you are improving? Did you have thoughts about that as you were filling it out?
Well, not really the instrument. I feel like we've had lots more conversations about these items and we've been more like transparent in talking about them. So like it's just been, we've been conscious about since the year we've been really like focusing on some of this stuff. So is it that we just talked about it more often? If you never said culture of response, and then now you said it twice, is it because now you've said it twice and know it? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I'm not sure, but I'll be quiet now.
Well, I think some of it has to do too with the strategic goals that these kind of align, so it's more prevalent to us and we're talking about it, that's kind of what I picked up.
I would offer that even having more discussions about the things that are being asked about in this instrument is improvement, right? Like if you are talking more about these kinds of things, that in and of itself that falls into all of those 12 standards, which is, boards addressing these kinds of things. Let's go back to the third question, which is just in a sense, like in a broad sense, what do you think? What did you see as the overall strengths and areas of improvement? What are your thoughts about that?
Culture and climate is a strength. Being a learning organization is a strength. Systems thinking, board member conduct, budgeting, financial accountability. And then I think the board's really feeling a lot around cultural responsiveness in terms of opportunities, data, and accountability.
Yeah, and in so many of those areas, I think red just disappeared in those areas, and that's ineffective, right? So those are just gone. The last question I will have for you that we will address at the end, but something to think about as we go through is, what do you want to do with this information? So we'll talk about what your thoughts are about how you take this information and move forward. And I will have some proposed, just, throw it up on the chalkboard goals so that we're not just starting with a blank slate and me going, now what do you want to do? So we'll talk about that at the end. So you're looking at this, probably the overview, as I'm asking you, what are your overall strengths and areas of improvement? There's your overview. Really sorry about the cutoff words on that you couldn't see accomplished and ineffective. I don't know why. I don't know why. But we'll see if we can fix that. So, going through the numbers, because I get, data in number form too, so I'm not just looking at the page, but crunching the numbers. Your overall strengths in order by the numbers are standard 11. That's basically your roles and responsibilities, right? Board conduct, ethics, relationship with the superintendent. That's one of those foundational standards that we want every board to have knowledge of. And again, that's your roles and responsibilities. Standard 7 was next, culture and climate. That's not one that I see as a strength very often. So it's great that you are self-identifying as creating a climate in which everyone feels welcome. That's the goal of that standard, is that you've got a welcoming atmosphere, that you're modeling those kinds of relationships, that you're setting the tone for an environment in which students, staff, and community feel comfortable, welcome, and included. And then standards 3 and 9 tied as far as the numbers: effective leadership and systems thinking. So, and I'll go through all of these. So what do these mean, right? These are the standards. The board, recognizing that it's essential to have a clear mutual understanding of the roles and responsibilities. The board supports and practices team building as an essential part of this relationship. And so not just team building with yourself, but also building that relationship with your superintendent. Culture and climate is creating that climate of expectations that all students can learn. That and that's one of those data pieces where just that belief that all students can learn, shared by all board members, can measurably move the dial on student outcomes. The board supports policy and procedures that foster a positive and safe learning environment. You're modeling professional relationships and a culture of mutual respect with staff and community. And this last one is kind of neat. The board models and establishes an organizational culture of service. So obviously you're on the board because you want to serve, you have a sense of service, but modeling that culture of service, it does filter out into the rest of the district. So what's effective leadership then? The board practicing and supporting leadership that is proactive, integrated, and distributed, establishing focus, direction, and expectations. The board ensures the alignment of authority and responsibility so that decisions can be made at levels closest to implementation. And then systems thinking. The board practices and supports systems thinking in deliberation. You're practicing an integrated view of education, and you're seeking out partnerships. You're leveraging your resources. And, you know, in some cases that's with other districts. In some cases that's with your community partners. So then I go through, and what I do is pick out the specific strengths that I see. So those items where it's mostly, you know, accomplished and effective, those kinds of things, where we're not having red appear and maybe fewer of the developing. And when I can, I try to combine into themes so that I'm not just listing individual questions, but I'm trying to combine some of those into themes if they have a relationship. Not all of them work like that, but these are the strongest ones that I found. Adopting a budget that aligns your resources with your vision and strategic goals. That was question 20. And you scored well on that. So, and that's important because one of the things that we try to teach a lot is how do you point your resources at what you say you want to do? So we all know that budgets are lean, and you know, funds are limited. They are not unlimited, but to the extent that the board can, how do you work your budget into and integrate it with your strategic plan? And you're reporting that that you feel good about that. The board has a trusting relationship with the superintendent and conducts an effective superintendent evaluation focused on monitoring progress on the district's strategic goals. So again, we're talking about pointing at the strategic goals and also having that effective collaborative relationship with your superintendent in trying to achieve that. Super important. The board, and those are questions 32 and 72 kind of mashed together. The board models relationships built on trust and respect and encourages professional learning across the system. So, and that is not only when you're encouraging professional learning, like that's not just at the staff level, that is at your superintendent level, that's at your level, and you do that. I mean, this is professional learning. And then with that, you're building relationships on trust and respect, which is also very visible in the community and amongst staff. And then the board is well versed in its roles and responsibilities, as you reported, including preserving confidentiality of executive sessions and not using your office for personal gain. So those seem technical, but obviously they're very important because when those things go wrong, they go really wrong. And they make the paper. So this is good. This is, you know, good that you are really strong in those requirements and roles and responsibilities. Any questions about those? Okay. So for overall themes of areas of improvement, these were the top ones by the numbers. Innovation and creativity being the top one, standard 6, cultural responsiveness, and then standard 5, using data for continuous improvement and accountability. And I will say, like, these numbers are really close. Like, there's no huge gap between anything or huge reporting of things being wrong. It's just by the numbers, these were the bottom three. So what are those? Innovation and creativity. Using those two things as assets in the process of development and change. You're thinking about things in new ways. You're thinking about seemingly intractable problems in new ways, or maybe with new partners, or thinking about new problems in new ways, or maybe with new partners. So again, leveraging partnerships, encouraging dialogue, different perspectives, welcoming in voices that maybe you haven't had before. And, I get asked a lot like, well, how do we get innovative and creative when you won't let us talk outside of a meeting? That's not my rule, but at the same time, the board can sit around the table in a work session and really learn deeply about something, and then, be a sounding board, be a thought partner with your superintendent and staff. And of course, that's balanced by not getting into management, but done well, those can be really rich conversations. Cultural responsiveness, recognizing cultural diversity in its many forms, understanding that students come to you with many types of diversity. And so making sure that you are not, that you are trying to reduce and eliminate barriers to access. And then using meaningful data from multiple sources, looking at strengths and areas of improvement, looking at priorities, and then monitoring. So this goes along with standard 4. Standard 4 is monitoring, and then standard 5 is using data. And that's really about being like, what is your data literacy? Do you know what's being measured at the district level? Do you understand that? And then how do you use data to make the big decisions that you have to make? Any questions on those? Okay. Here are the specifics. Not really super low scores in anything, but what I saw pointed out was establishing performance goals for yourself. Question 33, that scored a little bit lower. So maybe we'll try to do some of that tonight. The second was the board ensures that approved programs have effective data collection and requirements and measurable results, and uses the data to identify discrepancies between current and desired outcomes. So really ensuring that whatever the goals are, data can be collected from those. And then how do you get, like, what's the gap analysis? How do you get from, okay, we're here and we know it because we have data that shows it, to here, this is where we want to be. And so, and talking about those things. I'm sorry, this is identity, as it should say identify. And then finally, the board approaches decision-making in consideration of cultural diversity and ensures district employees are representative of the values and culture of the community. And so just thinking about, like, what are the values of your district? How do you ensure that everyone knows those and can really point to those and teach and work through those values? If you've got stated values, if there's something in your strategic plan and goals that says this is what Phoenix Talent values, and then ensuring that those also include respect for the cultural diversity of your students. Any questions on those? Okay.
Well,
Yeah.
Kristen.
Yep.
What performance goals do you see board set for itself?
Well, I will get to some that I recommended for you
Okay.
when we get to the end. I mean, some of them are, if you're going to align your performance goals with this instrument, some can be really, as technical but meaningful as, as having work sessions to understand data, to understand programs, to understand, my board had a whole work session on pay to play. Like, how did that impact our budget? And, things like that. So to really understand, so work sessions on specific things, I will see as being part of goals. If you're low in roles and responsibilities, I see goals for all right, let's do some discrete training. Innovation and creativity can say, all right, we're going to include these kinds of things on our agenda, like once a quarter or we're gonna have work sessions. Community engagement can be one that has some specific goals set, like either that's the boards out there and attending more things, or there is a way to incorporate more community voice, including student voice. And so there, can be discrete goals set around that. And some boards are just like, hey, we don't even have a strategic plan. Let's start there. And that's a big goal. And then that's the only one they set. But we can go through, I'll show you what I kind of recommended for you to consider. And then you'll see examples.
Great, thank you.
Thank you for that question. So a report that I get that you don't is a congruence report, which is how aligned were you in your ratings, whether the ratings were high or low, where were you most on the same page and most on a different page? Because that's an interesting conversation in and of itself. So the area of highest congruence was in Standard 11. That was your highest one, which is roles and responsibilities. You all were pretty much on the same page as far as how you felt you were doing. And the area of highest incongruence, same as last year, I think both of these are the same as last year, were Standard 5 using data. So there was some, within that standard, there were questions where it was a little more diverse in answers. Now, there were some answers, as you'll see in there, that had green, blue, and yellow in them. And what I tried to do was see like, okay, what's the spread? Is it just like one yellow? I don't know if that's super different, but if we've got like, 3 per or whatever, that makes a more meaningful difference. And that there's also something that crunches the numbers for me on this too. So that's your area of most disagreement. And I want to pause there for a second. And I know that probably nobody remembers everything they said. But if you wanted to flip to Standard 5, one of the things that I always try and say is, like, is it a calibration conversation? Because sometimes when boards disagree, it's because they read the questions differently. And so sometimes there's an opportunity to have a calibration conversation. And then there are times where it's like, yeah, I really do think that we need to develop a lot in this. And over here, somebody's saying, I think we do this great all the time. And that's a good thing to be able to talk about. So if you wanted to take a minute, oops, clicked the wrong thing, and look at Standard 5, it starts on page.
Well,
Yeah, it starts on page 14 of 29.
oh, I thought 12.
And you'll see that, there's just some areas here. Well, by the numbers, this was the area that it was most incongruent. And so I think where we're seeing some of that is in like question 39, communicating to the public how policy decisions are linked to student data. 41, which is ensuring that data used in decision making is disaggregated, culturally representative, and provides the ability to monitor the district's strategic goals. One thing I'll point out in question 39 is that 2 of you said never last year, and nobody said never this year, which is great. Those are the 2. I mean, there's the question 40 had a little bit of, disagreement as well. But again, these numbers are all pretty close together, but just wanted to open that up and see if anybody had strong feelings about any of those questions that they wanted to share their viewpoint on that.
And there's 3 of us not here, but I would also say like, when we talked to Brent about his evaluation, it comes around this data and having time to digest it and understand it and get the disaggregated amounts and all that. So it kind of follows through the whole thing, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Are there 3 of you that aren't there? You just like have a
Yes.
quorum. Oh, okay. Okay. That's good context. Okay.
Just want to make that clear. For me, I think where this comes down is I feel like we actually do talk about data a lot and look at data a lot. But but I think it's somewhat sporadic, or we feel like it's somewhat sporadic. And I'm just processing this, and I don't know if this is really getting at your question, Kristen, but I just feel like there should be a standard set of data that we are looking at every board meeting. You know,
I've said this for a while.
I know, and I think we just get into our normal rhythm of the year, and we do a good job being consistent, I think, from year to year on when we do things. And we have really cool touch points throughout our calendar, like our JAB meeting, where we look at data, where the admin team comes and presents some data, and we do quarterly updates on the strategic plan, and we look at some data, but I think there's probably just not the level of, just rote consistency at every touch point that, we might desire. And then I also think we do a lot of innovative things like preschools and, community care and things like that. But I do think it is an opportunity for us to, from the outset, have a conversation of what do we want to accomplish with this? How will we know we're successful? And so, like with community care, we've looked at some data there. But and I'm not trying to pick on them. It's just an example of something I think innovative that we've done. That I don't remember having a conversation from the outset to say,
We have this many people.
yeah, what do we want to accomplish with this? And how are we gonna measure it throughout? And how will we know if it's successful? And so I think that's.
Or like
that's-
attendance, we touch on attendance, but we don't see the numbers on a regular basis.
Right.
Of the, like,
Right.
I'm thinking of what you're saying and going to like action, so like attendance number, I thought about 3 things, but I forgot them. But I'm thinking that maybe those are like once a month, we have those
Enrollment.
enrollment, yes, that's what.
What's that looking like? Yeah, I don't know exactly what they are, but I think there are some of those key things that just, especially when they're things related to our strategic plan. And also things that's not gonna create a bunch of extra work, but just already stuff that exists that could just be brought into a standard format that we're looking at.
Do you have monitoring sessions for your strategic plan? Did I freeze?
We do, yeah. Pretty much quarterly, yeah.
Hang on, I moved my desk and now my camera is gone.
Uh-oh.
It's okay, cause we can just see the presentation, so if you don't get it back.
Oh, okay. Okay. I don't know.
It's
what it-
okay.
Okay. And I wonder like how that will go and or change, with the implementation of Senate Bill 141, right? You will be getting updates 3 times a year on different and more things. And so I feel like maybe you've already talked about this.
Yeah. Is it standardized? Is it gonna be the same for everyone? What does that look like?
Right, exactly. So you will certainly be getting a lot of information, but I think it's also helpful to think about like, okay, these are the required things that the district is reporting on, but for us also, what are the other important things? And again, Michael, to your point about like not creating a ton of extra work, which, nobody wants to do that, but what are the pieces of your strategic plan that maybe are not going to be reported as part of SB 141 or that are really key for you all in measuring success? And then, do you have that at a board meeting? Do you talk about that in a work session? Like, what do you do with that? See, this is how you develop goals. This is what you're doing.
And I also just I think we probably look at a lot of data and we're so used to it. Kind of been a theme of the night too, is we have high expectations of ourselves and of our team and, you know, of our district and with much accomplished, much is asked, I think, and so I think that's part of it too. Yeah, we have high standards.
Mhm.
So for me, question 39, the board communicates to the public. I think the district communicates to the public, but I don't know how the board does.
Mhm.
So I think it's just having conversation on how that works.
Mhm.
I think it's probably a board chair thing, but I don't
Great.
know. I mean, I don't know, I mean, I honestly don't know how we communicate to them. I know how the district does. I know Joe does really great. I know we have lots of information and data on the website. I know we send out parents information, but that's all the district.
Mhm.
I'm not clear on how the board does it.
I struggled with that when I was answering it, and I remember when I looked at like, I don't know,
Isn't that kind of,
being.
isn't that
visible.
kind of synonymous though, Kristen, the board and the district?
I
Or
think
no?
where the board comes into that, I mean, yes, it is district staff, it is your superintendent that are gonna, you know, send out whatever they're gonna send out, and at the school level. But I think where the board comes in is when you are talking about something in a board meeting, you're communicating to the public,
Oh.
right? Like when you're saying, here's how we're making our decisions, and it's gonna be based on this. Like that is communication to the public. Yes, you're right. I am not advocating for the board to start sending out newsletters saying, like, here's our data, because that would not be the role of the board. But you know, if you are making decisions and talking about what's informing those decisions, and when I say data, when we say data, we do not just mean student performance data, right? Data is just information. And so if you've got information on finances, if you've got information on community engagement or other kinds of things, that's also data. And so making decisions and being clear about how those align with the information that you have is the board communicating to the public.
Oh, see, I think this came down to how you read the question.
Right. This might be a calibration thing, right? Like this, yeah.
We're feeling like we aren't doing enough.
Yeah, I didn't read the question that way. I read it as the board communicates, and to me, a communication is like a formal communication. I
Mhm.
didn't think of it as just like the way we run meetings and stuff. So I think this is just kind of like the way my brain read that question.
Yeah, and that, I mean, like, and that's what I mean, like, part of the time, like, when a board is, you know, has incongruence, sometimes that is a calibration question. Like, how did I read it? How did you read it? Now, how do we really feel as a group
Right.
as to, you know, how we're doing
Now
here?
that you explain it, I would change my answer.
That's good. It's not being graded. Okay, great conversation. Anything else on this one before I move on?
I think 41 is the same thing as well. I think that one is probably comes down to how we read the question.
Mm-hmm. Anybody want to comment on that or have questions about that one? 41?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I was like, I didn't know what all that meant.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? Like, I understand we do talk about things culturally all the time. We monitor, but we don't have a rubrics on that. So, like, are we doing a good job? Because we don't have a rubrics. That's what came in my mind, and that's why I said it.
And I think
Do we
in
need a rubrics?
41,
Probably not.
yeah, I think, you know, if we're looking at 41, that does not require a rubric. It's just that, you know, so when we're looking at, you know, how we're doing, are we looking at all of our student groups? Are we identifying gaps between student groups? Like, is it representative of everyone, of all students, and then each student kind of as well, not by name, of course. And is that data that you are using, then does that point at your strategic goals?
The answer is yes. Again, I read that. Now that you explained that, I would have changed my answer.
Well, and that's why this is the conversation, right? So,
Yeah.
mhm.
Yeah.
Well, I remember this conversation in the year.
I have deja vu, actually.
Oh, I just have to just call myself out.
That's good. I know. I like, and again, you know, sometimes it is just how we all read it, and then everybody, sort of changes their minds about that, which is fine.
Well, in all fairness, I think I did like so many self-evaluations in the last month that I think I just kind of started, yeah.
I.
Oh, that's right, you've done more than one.
Word data always trips me up, because I always think of data as quantitative.
Yeah.
Or maybe not necessarily just quantitative, but just presented in a certain way.
A bar chart.
Right, but really what data is it's just information.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so, if you kind of substitute the word information for data, I wonder how we would answer this question differently.
I think we would answer it. I think that's a good point.
I think I would probably feel like we are doing a much better job than, or I would feel like we're, yeah.
I agree. If it said information instead of data, I would have gave us a read, but it said data. And I think of,
Right.
like, I need a chart.
Yes.
Or I need a rubric, and I hate rubrics, so I don't know why I wanted one. They are absolutely not my favorite at all. It's a good thing. Well, I do not like them.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Well, we will then look at specific areas of incongruence by the number. So 26 was one where it was a little more disagreement. The board regularly reflects on its performance and makes substantive change based on the results of the self-evaluation. So, do you set a goal for yourself, and do you work on that? Do you self-report? Do you track it over the course of the year? And there was some disagreement in that. 30, the board supports rewards, consequences, and recognition systems to encourage advancement of the district's strategic goals. So, is there just an expectation out there, and, what happens if it's not met, or are you recognizing, when progress is made towards strategic goals? Is that celebrated? Is it rewarded in some way or recognized? Then 44, the board has a process to review policies for cultural responsiveness and bias. And there was some disagreement on that as well. And so I'll stop here and wonder if anybody has thoughts or questions about that.
What's an example that we do of that second bullet point?
I think like celebrating, like at JAB meetings, when people share that their attendance is, has improved a lot, we definitely celebrate that. So a reward is kind of like a pat on the back. But I don't know that we have like a recognition system, and
I think that's why that's hard to answer.
It is,
Yeah.
and then consequences. I mean, this is where I get real technical, and I'm like, well, we have one employee, and that's the superintendent.
Yeah.
So, so it's hard for me to conceptualize some of this stuff.
And like, to me, the board shouldn't be giving out consequences. I mean, that seems kind of hard.
Well, if we need a course correction in something.
Yeah, I know,
and a
but-
strategic goal or isn't going right, then we have to, whatever, I
But,
see
like,
that.
To me, a consequence is like, if you
Oh,
don't do this
I know.
now, you're what? I mean, like, what, I guess, Kristen, what is a consequence the board gives out?
So yeah, not like being grounded, but I think, and that is a tougher word in this, in this assessment. We can't change this because this is something that we license from a researcher. But, I think what he's meaning is it accountability, right? Like if the advancement of the district's strategic goals is not happening, then what, right? There's the
Okay.
So
Okay,
what?
at the beginning
Now
of
what?
this, we had a whole discussion about like, why did we think that we improved over the last time? It's because every time we learn more about what the questions are asking, and we're getting. Just saying that.
Yeah. Yeah, because we do have accountability. I feel
Yes,
like.
yes.
And I
Oh,
think
true.
part of it is our shift in the superintendent evaluation process. To
Mhm,
bring more visibility to our strategic planning and
mhm.
strategic goals and, for our students and
Mhm.
so. Okay.
Mhm.
And I think for me, the last one, 44, I think it's because I go to too many meetings. I'm just gonna, and I hear these people say, every single decision we make, they take out a rubrics and we look at the policy, and I'm like, we do not do that. And so that's why I voted ourselves down, because we were doing what all these other boards do, but I have to give myself grace because I do think we're one of the best boards in Oregon. So I just kind of contradicted myself, like and I'll say it, we're one of the best boards out there, but then I like rate myself harsh against boards who say they do things that we don't. So.
And I think
Yeah.
this is not necessarily the thing that I envision here, and there are boards that do this, and maybe you do this too, is that this is not necessarily the application of an equity lens on all of your decisions, but that, that is a practice that, on the big decisions that we recommend. And that can just be like 3 questions, right? That happen fast. But so there are some boards that, when they've got like a discipline policy or student behavior policy or something else that that could disproportionately impact whoever, staff or students, in different ways, that for the language that's not coming straight from statute, that if you've got bracketed language in there, or if there's a policy you're writing, like my district wrote an AI policy before it existed, and so if there's something that you're and if you do that, run it by Spencer, but like if there's please run it by Spencer. But if there's something that you are either creating or changing in a big way, or that it's it's one of those that's likely going to have a big impact on students in some way. And I'm just using like student conduct because that is one of those. Like, are you looking at that through that same lens? Like, who does this positively impact? Who does this negatively impact? Who's not at the table for this? Like those kinds of things. And that would not necessarily be for every policy, but it would be for those that you can recognize as high impact on people.
And we're laughing because we went overboard on this with the cell phone policy. And I think we do that a lot. Staff comes in already giving us like, we looked at this lens and this lens, and then I think it's like a natural thing, and my brain thought we need it, like, but honestly, I think it's just kind of become a natural.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I mean, that was a big reason why we took so long to pass the cell phone policy, is because we
Mhm.
were looking at that.
Mhm.
We really were considering our cultural responsiveness and bias, and very sensitive to that, and
Mhm.
more to come on that issue. I don't know if Odie's watching right now, but anyway.
Well, good. So you've identified that is something you do. So again, I think we're having a calibration conversation here as well.
Yeah, the 4 of us will be really calibrated for next year.
Yeah.
So I'm
Super
suggesting-
dialed in.
Yes, they
Please.
should.
And before we took our self-evaluation, Kristen led us through it on our OSBA board. And she actually had us read the questions prior to the meeting. And then she's like, does anyone have anything that they may? And so we talked about some things, so
Okay.
maybe we could, I don't know, I don't wanna give someone, but if someone's like, okay, these are the things we talked about, and then maybe just give us the board that little written note about this and this and this, then that might be helpful.
Especially like for Diana, who's new and has no
Right.
clue about like some of this, like what, do we have one of those rubric for that policy
Right.
on cultural
Mhm.
responsibility? I mean, she
Right.
would know. So that would be very helpful.
Mhm.
So maybe before we do the self-evaluation, just kind of talk about what those questions mean. We did that, we didn't go through it on every single question at OSBA. Kristen was great and just pick some,
But maybe she knows.
but
what the
she
hot
might be able to do that again.
Yes.
But, it was nice because then we were kind of on the same page when we went to take the
Yeah.
test.
Mhm. Yeah, we talked about, what is unclear or needs definition, or what do you as a group need to calibrate on before you take this? And then there were a couple of terms that we defined, or that the board defined and then sent out to everybody else. And I wonder next year, if you take this, if you would want to maybe go through this year's that has the last 2 years on it and
Okay.
talk about, because then you've got all the questions in front of you. And then talk about like, hey, are there any of these that we need to ensure that, we all understand? Like, here are the 5 that I came with that I don't, or I got more clarity last year, or I don't get, and ensure that everybody is thinking about the question the same way. You could use this year's to do that next year.
Like data / information, I think that would be really helpful.
Mhm. Mhm. Great. So now we come to the what do you want to do with this information? And as I'm, listening to you, I'm listening to you have data conversations and maybe wanting to look at how you do that, how you talk about data, how you receive it, how you process it. But what I also did is I take what I see here and I try to look at your strengths, because we always want to look at your strengths too when we're setting goals, and look at your areas of improvement. And how do you take something that you say that you want to improve and leverage your strengths in that to rely on those strengths to, to improve. So what I do is I come with a few, and I would not say adopt all of these or any of them if you don't want to, but like I come with a few sort of pre-written suggested goals based on what I'm seeing here. And we can talk through those. And in the end, you will pick whatever you want, but I like to come with something rather than just being like, all right, what do you want to do? Because that blank slate thing doesn't typically work very well. So I'll walk you through what I saw. And as I'm listening to you converse and as you're all talking, this may have changed, but again, I'm just, throwing spaghetti at the wall. So the first one was maybe establish a like sort of, you wouldn't have to do this is not a thing, but a board progress scorecard where you're keeping track, where you're reviewing quarterly with 2 to 3 specific annual performance targets for the board itself. So using your existing proficiency in conducting the evaluation and monitoring progress on the strategic goals, do you want to look at, looking at your own performance target, checking in with like, what did we say we were going to do? And are we doing it? So checking in with yourself about, if we say we're going to have X number of work sessions to go over whatever, did we do it? Did we have monitoring sessions on our strategic plan? Like, let's actually formally check in on that. Another one is implementing sort of a program impact review cycle where the board evaluates at least 2 major district programs per year for measurable student outcomes. So looking at disaggregated data and looking for return on investment. So you identified a strength in adopting a budget that aligns your resources with your vision. So then how are you, and again, you may already be doing this, but like, how do you then look at the programs that are supposed to have impact and have that conversation, looking at a gap analysis, looking at disaggregated data on the return on investment on those pieces. And when I see boards do this, they bring in their administrators and principals and talk about, okay, so this year, we wanted to adopt this, adapt this, and abandon this, right? Because if you're in a low ROI for something, like what does strategic abandonment look like? Or this is working really well, how do we continue this? Or we just need to adapt this. The third one would be to incorporate an equity or impact lens as a standard component of policy reviews. Now, again, I talked more specifically about like the kinds of policies you may want to look at and major decision making. So you identified a strength in understanding your legal roles, responsibilities, and ethical governance. Like that kind of translates into, okay, now how do we apply those principles of ethical governance to what impacts people. And I just talked about that. I won't go over that again. Or you could pick something from the incongruence slide. However, as you talked through the incongruence, I don't think that you were as disparate as the scores looked, so that might go out the window. Or you could pick something else that you wanted to work on this year. My recommendation is like 1 or 2 things. If you are really busy this year, 1. And, if you've got loads of extra time, which everybody does, 2. But I think, having something that you as a board that is professional development or commitment from you, is a good thing to have, because then we can check in on that next year as well. And you don't have to decide tonight, but these are some ideas.
I like 2 to 3. The third one is like 3 questions that we can just put before we pass certain policies that we just put in the agenda, or, put at the top of the policy, or in board book at the top of it, the 3 questions. And just as we're due for information and discussion, just
Reminder.
just a reminder, yeah, to put it there. To me, the most timely and one that stands out is that middle one about the program impact review, because I think those are the conversations we need to be having. I like the idea of a scorecard, but it's just, I don't know that it's a huge priority right now, and I think we'll kind of spin our wheels, kind of figure out what it would look like, and might spend 2 or 3 meetings on that. So, but the program impact review, and I think specifically, I think we would do right by our staff also to have a conversation about what data we want ahead of time. So, like, I'm thinking of a recent example where we got some data on the community care program, right? And I think with the best of intentions, it was brought to us, some data was brought to us, but there might have been something else I would have liked to see about that program, or there might have been a different format that would have been helpful, or, and so I think we should, as part of this, have a conversation about what it is we want to see and how we want it formatted, and then go forth with what that looks like. I also think we just need to be really sensitive about the fact that there are 99% of the time people attached to the programs, and so when you're reviewing, that could you just need to be sensitive to the human aspect of things like that.
The time constraint.
What's that?
Can you explain more?
Not the time constraint. If we're reviewing a program and we're evaluating its ROI, and we have staff that are working in those programs, and we're having conversations about that program maybe not having the effectiveness that it should, we just need to be sensitive and mindful of that,
impact.
of the impact that has on the human beings in our system that are doing their best work. But maybe things aren't having the impact that they should be, or that we need it to. Thoughts. And again, we don't have to decide today. And I don't think we should, because it's 8:10, so. And there's only 4 of us.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, is not to, decide anything. Talk about it when you're a full board and you've got more time. But I will certainly send this to you so that you can look at, what those suggestions are, and you can continue to talk about that. I would strongly encourage you to adopt something, even if it's not any of these things. If some of the conversation that you had sort of inspired a different thought, I would encourage you to develop a goal around that, or use a mishmash of these or something, but really encourage you to commit to some, like, either action that you will take as a board, or a process that you will implement, or some sort of professional development that you will all do related to anything that you saw here. That would be my
Maybe
recommendation.
look at an April or a May for info and discussion, and then kind of assign maybe the folks who couldn't be here today, like just a strong encouragement to go and watch this session.
Work on that.
Okay, thank you. And then we could just literally bring this slide back.
What did we take as an action out of the last time we did this?
I don't know that we followed through on it.
I don't know what it is. That's accountability right there.
If you do get something in the books this year that you want to do, if you will let me know, then I can check in with you next year
I like
on
it.
it.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Kristen.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for it's really good. I mean, this is a research-based instrument and so performance on these 12 standards really does, impact student outcomes. And so when you assess your own performance, which is another piece of research that shows that boards that assess their own performance and talk about it honestly, like they're going to move the dial as well. And so I appreciate your engagement, taking time to do this, and let me know if you decide to commit to something, and I'll put that in my notes and revisit that with you next time.
Sounds great. Thank you so
All right.
much.
Thank you all.
Here.
Bye.
Bye. Okay, how fast can you go through it?
Really quick, the proposed calendar, I just wanna highlight a few things, it's some differences.
Yeah.
We are, looking at a soft start for certain grade levels, really, for the secondary and kindergarten. Sixth, ninth and kindergarten, and so, first day for all students will be the 9th. We do start Labor Day as the latest it can be, Labor Day is the latest it can be. So it is a late start, which pushes us up to mid-June. In negotiations, we did switch paid holiday Indigenous Peoples' Day for Thanksgiving. So that is a day off for licensed staff. And we're working with other employee groups to see what that looks like as well. It will likely be a day off for classified staff, but we will bring them back on a different in-service day. We don't have a fall in-service scheduled into here. Basically because we feel like we can do some of our PD and take advantage of the Wednesdays. And this is 172-day student contact, which is one more than we had this year. So, and a couple more than we had the year before. So we're having more student contact, students in session. The only day after we start on the 9th that students are not on campus when staff are on campus are really the end of quarter in-service days. So that's it. Take a look at that. Well, I wanted to give it for information discussion so we can do action right when we get back to spring break.
Great. Anything else? With that, we are adjourned.